Thank you to everyone for attending this Governance Committee meeting on Wednesday the 1st of June 2022. My name is Councillor Mark Clifford and I am the Vice Chair of this committee. I will be chairing this meeting today in the absence of the Chair, Councillor Deborah Platt. And on behalf of this committee, I'm sure we'd all like to wish her well. Please note this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. When you want to speak, please raise your hand. When I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on and please turn your microphone off when you have finished speaking. If the technology fails, then I will adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue, or if this is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. Please can everyone ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent? We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came in. And we do have the independent member, I believe, dialing in on Teams. So welcome. And if we can start with apologies.
We've had apologies from Councillor Deborah Platt and Councillor Magda Collins will be subbing.
Thank you. And if we can start with agenda item number 1, which is the minutes of the meeting held on Wednesday the 16th of March 2022. And the recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting be approved. Thank you, Gordon. Do we have a seconder? It will be me then. Yep. On to, so those minutes are approved. Declarations of any interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. On to item agenda 3, which is Chorley Borough Council Audit Progress Report, and you'll find that on pages 9 to 24. And I'm going to ask Matt Derrick, who's Audit Manager at Grant Thornton, to present this report, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so the progress report is the first of our 2 papers in the pack today. I'll just start on page 12 in the pack. This summary just gives a bit of an overview of where we're up to with the 21-22 financial audit. We've completed our initial planning work back in March, and our audit plan is the next item on the agenda. So we'll be presenting that shortly. We've also recently given a bit of a workshop and kind of training session to officers off the back of the previous year's audits to try and hopefully make audits go a bit, the process go a bit smoother between ourselves in future, and just giving a bit of guidance on the types of evidence that we need to look at to complete our audit. Other things since the last committee meeting is we have now certified the, sorry, I'm on page 13 in the pack now. We have now certified the housing benefit subsidy claim as well and submitted that to DWP a little later than the deadline, but on the 28th of February that was, sorry, the deadline was 28th of February, but we reported that to DWP on the 31st of March. I'm pleased to say that's been completed now. Page 14 in the pack just sets out a bit of information on the additional fees that were proposed for the 2021 audit due to the delays that we kind of encountered in completing that audit. As I say, to hopefully try and avoid some of those issues recurring in the future, we have worked with Louise and her team to try and support officers where we can to try and avoid some of those delays in the future in providing the evidence that we need to complete the audit. Over page 16, just gives a really high-level overview of our audit timetable for the rest of the year. The audit plan, as I say, we'll be presenting shortly. We hope to deliver the audit findings report by November 22. I'm hopeful that we can bring that a little earlier. November, the 30th of November is going to be the statutory deadline for publishing audited accounts. So that's the kind of the latest we'll hope to bring that, but ideally bring that by November. And then we've put December here for the auditor's annual report, which is where we report our value for money conclusions. Again, we're going to look to do that work alongside the financial audit this year to report a little earlier. But we do have the kind of 3 months extension beyond the issuing the audit opinion on the accounts to deliver the value for money work as well. So it's possible that we'll deliver that report a little earlier, but we're trying to at least bring that closer to the accounts opinion than this year. I wasn't going to present the rest of the pack, but there's a bit of information there on our kind of quality assessments that we are subject to in the audit sector. And then the rest of the pack is a collection of local government insights from our specialist team that may be of interest to members. But happy to take any questions on that report.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor France, Gordon France.
Just page 14, obviously the additional fees. I just noticed the comments that progress in the audit was very slow, with information requests outstanding for a number of weeks in some cases, when additional resources were brought in by the council to help the final couple of weeks. Some of the outstanding information was then provided in a matter of a couple of days, indicating the requests appeared to be fairly straightforward and the information readily available. Just obviously, we don't want additional expenses if we can avoid it. Are there things in place now to make sure that there isn't an occurrence? It looks as though it's just almost an oversight.
Bring Louise into this.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, partly the reason for the delays, we had sickness in the team and maternity leave, so both of those in the key areas that would have been involved in the production of the accounts. We did try to bring resources in earlier through the use of agency staff, but the difficulties of recruiting agency staff who are remote working and trying to train them up on systems proved quite difficult, and so we kind of abandoned part of that idea and continued within the team. Absolutely, lessons learnt, and so this year I now lead this area of work. We have a very, very detailed timetable and an item by item, action by action listed out. There's about 300 lines involved in the spreadsheet, where we've got a date for completion, a responsible officer who leads on that, and they're RAG rated to know whether they've been started, in progress, whether they've been completed. We meet as a team every Thursday morning to go through that, and the individuals responsible go through their areas and report what progress has been made and where they're up to, and we have like a forward 2-week look to make sure that things in the pipeline are being geared up for delivery. Again, working with Matt and George and Grant Thornton, we had a training session to make sure that the evidences that the auditors would require we actually have in advance, so we can preempt what they're going to ask us about various areas. And as a consequence of that was the team found that really useful. They have then gone back and kind of bolstered up some of that evidence in advance of the audit commencing. And I know that Matt, Georgia and myself, we met up quite regularly towards the end of the last audit, and I think that proved useful and successful, so as we could identify where the issues were, both from our side and from their side, and then we could go and chivvy as appropriate, really, to make sure things happen. And I think that's when we started to see some improvement. I think as the report notes, from February onwards, we did start to get much more traction there. And also, you know, with it being a small team, there was single points of failure, as you know, with people on maternity leave and sickness, it was difficult to cover. What I've done this year is made sure that we spread out that knowledge and have more people involved in the process, so there's less opportunity that things can fall down or hold us up because we're waiting for information off specific individuals. So kind of a varied approach to tackling, and I'm hopeful this year that we shouldn't see anything like the way it was done last year.
Thank you, Louise. It sounds as though you're on top of it. I wonder whether it was, I mean, obviously unprecedented times anyway.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? No, thank you. So are we happy for the report to be noted? Take that as noted. Yeah, thank you. Now, there's a second part. We have to approve the increase in the 2020-21 audit fees of 17,000. So we're going to go to a vote on this. I shall propose that we accept. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Gordon. And if you can look at your screens, and you will be voting via your microphones there, if you just press whichever. And that's everybody, and that is unanimous. Thank you. And thank you, Matt. On to item 4 is the external audit plan for 2021-22. And again, this will be Matt, and if I could ask you to present the report, please.
Thank you, yeah. So I'll just start on page 30 in the pack, which is the introduction headlines page. I'll cover the risks identified on the audit shortly, but just to highlight on this page, so this summarises the findings from our initial planning in preparation for the 21-22 final accounts audit. What I just want to draw your attention to on this page is that the council for 21-22 has established 2 new subsidiary companies, Chorley Leisure and Chorley Property Limited. At the moment, we're waiting kind of an assessment from officers on whether the impacts of these 2 new companies are significant enough to require a group accounts to be prepared for the council this year, which would be a set of accounts which consolidates, which shows that the council kind of only income and expenditure and balances, and then the subsidiary companies as well, and then a total group account. If that's kind of required, that's a kind of additional step in production of the accounts, and then also our audit. But we're kind of awaiting an assessment from finance team as to whether that's required. I'll just jump into the risks over the page 31. So these are the significant risks that we've identified as part of our audit planning. The auditing standards require us to assume a risk of fraud in revenue recognition, but we are allowed to rebuke that risk if we think that's justified. In the case of the council, we do think it's appropriate to rebuke that risk on the basis of the kind of nature of the revenue streams that the council has, and therefore we don't consider this to be a significant risk for the council, and we won't be undertaking any specific work in this area other than normal procedures to gain assurance over the revenue in the accounts. Similarly, the auditing standards require us to assume a risk of management override of controls. Now, this risk we can't rebuke; we have to assume this risk applies. And where this we focus particularly is looking at manual journals that management may have posted to the accounts and the impact they have on the financial statements. Particular focus on estimates to assess whether there's any indication of any bias or inappropriate use of judgments and assumptions in the significant estimates and make sure that they're reasonable. And also have a look at any significant or unusual kind of one-off transactions and how they've been accounted for in the accounts. Just over the page 32, the pension fund and liability is a highly material value and a significant estimate in the financial statements, and therefore we recognise a significant risk in relation to that estimate just because of the inherent estimation uncertainty in terms of how that liability is calculated. In response to that, we look at the instructions that management has given to the actuary to produce that estimate. And the information that's been provided, so payroll information and staff information, to make sure that's kind of complete and accurate. We also work and rely on the work of the pension fund auditor for the Lancashire Pension Fund, who give us significant assurance over those balances as well. Then we look at the consistency of the asset and liability calculations and how the updates to the accounts have been made and the appropriate disclosures around those numbers as well. Over the page 33, Another significant estimate in the council's accounts is the revaluation of land and buildings and investment properties. Again, both of those estimates involve quite significant assumptions and judgments and larger volumes of kind of input data from comparable transactions in the market, and so there's an inherent estimation uncertainty with those figures. And they're highly material in the council's accounts. So in response to this risk, again, we'll be looking at the process and assumptions that have been used to produce those estimates, the instructions that the council has given to your external valuer, and look at the methodology and that valuer has applied. And we'll be looking to corroborate some of this most significant assumptions and input data to supporting evidence to make sure that the assumptions that have been applied are reasonable. And then again, we'll be looking at how those revaluations have actually been accounted for and input into the financial statements and make sure that's been done correctly. Over the page 34, this section just gives a bit of information on the auditing standards in relation to significant estimates, which continue to be puts a lot of emphasis and responsibility on ourselves as auditors to really make sure that those estimates are robust. In the council's accounts, there are several accounting estimates in addition to the ones that we've identified kind of significant risks in relation to. So there's also, in addition to the land and buildings valuations and pensions, there's also depreciation, the provisions for business rates appeals, credit loss allowances, and kind of fair value estimates as well. So although those other estimates we don't consider to be significant risks in the financial statements, they are still accounting estimates that require particular focus as part of our work. And just as part of our planning work, we have requested information from management through our kind of planning inquiries, which is actually I think the next paper on the agenda as well. And part of those inquiries does cover the significant estimates in the financial statements to get management's assessment on how those estimates are produced, what the key kind of assumptions are in those estimates, and provide us the information that we need to then plan our work. I'll just skip ahead then over to page 38, which just explains the materiality that we apply to the audit. So materiality is the kind of threshold that we set in terms of assessing whether the accounts are fundamentally kind of correct or not. The threshold we set is a 1.9% of gross expenditure. At the moment, we've based that on the prior year gross expenditure, which is equivalent to about £966,000. We'll obviously, once we receive the actual draft financial statements, we'll look at that and make sure that that's still appropriate. We do set a lower materiality for certain areas of the account that are either particularly sensitive and otherwise would be kind of considered immaterial. But so where that applies is for disclosures around the officers' remuneration, and so we set a lower materiality threshold for that. We also set a threshold of what we call triviality, which is set at £48,000 at planning, and that's the level at which we would report any errors above that. And so if there are any immaterial errors in the accounts that are more than £48,000, we report those as part of our work. I'll just skip ahead to page 40, which just sets out our responsibilities for assessing the council's value for money arrangements. At the time of planning, we have not yet completed the prior year value for money work. We hope to report that very, very shortly over the next couple of weeks. So at this stage in planning, we haven't recognised any significant risks in relation to the council's arrangements. But following the conclusion of the 2021 value for money work, we may update the risk assessment and obviously report that, issue an updated report to members here. But if we continue, even without any recognising any significant risks, there is a minimum level of work we do to assess the council's arrangements across the three kind of categories of three criteria that we're required to evaluate, which is the governance, financial sustainability, and improving economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. So our work will be scoped to cover the arrangements under each of those areas. And if we do consider to be any significant risk of significant weaknesses, we'll also scope in additional work to focus on that as well. The page 42 again just sets out a bit of a timetable at again quite a high level, but just sets out that we hope to commence the audit in August following the receipt of the draft accounts, and report to the committee by November with our audit findings report. That was everything. Thank you. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Silence. Oh, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed on page 31, there's a note to previous examples where management may have overridden controls relating to procurement and the appointment of officers. I was wondering if that could be unpacked for us a little as to what that refers to.
Yeah, sure. So that refers to the previous issues we've recognised in kind of the governance and control environment, particularly around the authorisation of payments to creditors and suppliers, which I think internal audit previously reported on, and we consider that in our work as well. So that was really just the reference there is just an example of. The kind of risks that this focuses on is where the council's processes and controls, kind of as we expect them to operate, don't, and therefore that forms part of our risk assessment in terms of management override of controls.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the specific example was with regard to appointment of officers.
I can't recall off the top of my head, apologies, but that's, I think, again, an issue that internal audit have reported on previously. And again, it's the issue is around the controls not operating as we'd expect them to.
Sorry, I appreciate I might be asking the wrong person, but certainly if some more details could be provided on that after the meeting, that would be very useful.
Dawn?
Yeah, just to say really, this is not happened within the last 12 months, but what I'll do is I'll look back to the files previously and pick up anything I can find and send it on to you.
Thank you. Any more questions? No. Thank you. And the recommendation is to note the report. So if we're all happy, we shall move on. Thank you, Matt. On to agenda item 5, I should say. Management response to external audit planning enquiries, which is page 49 to 72 in your reports. And if I could ask Louise, Director of Finance, to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the 2021-22 audit preparation, as Matt just referred to earlier, external audit require us to provide information to assist them with their planning of the audit and areas that they want to place particular focus and attention on. The paper summarises and is here for information, listing the key questions that have been asked of us as officers and the responses that we have given. And so they're broken down into two parts, and what's attached to Appendix A and Appendix B. So Appendix A focuses on questions such as what have been the key events over the last 12 months, and obviously COVID has played a significant part in that. What are the any unusual or significant transactions that have occurred during that period? And of course, the continuation of the COVID business grants through that period has been particularly significant. Another just over 9 million coming into the council for then onward transmission to businesses within the district. Also, as Matt referred to earlier, the new leisure company was established during the year. They also ask us about whether there have been any changes to our accounting policies, the basis on which we prepare our accounts, and that there haven't been any in this financial year. We confirm that. Also, if we use advisors, which we do, which advisors we use. So that may be for specialist treasury management advice. We use a company called Link. For solicitors, for specialist legal advice, and such, and that would be referred to as valuers and actuaries in relation to the pension fund, and also questions about our assessment of risk and the measures that we have in place to ensure that the financial statements that we produce are free of material misstatement as a consequence of fraud. And so we outline our responses there. All of those Grant Thornton take on board, and that will give more direction of travel to the audit when they come in and focus on specific areas to ensure that what we're saying we do and we believe is in fact what actually happens on the ground. Appendix B, that's more concerned with the estimates that we include in the accounts and the methodologies that we use to produce those estimates. So that can be anything from land and buildings, for example. So obviously the actual cost of a land and building can be evidenced by reference to invoices, physical verification, but also we include in the accounts what we believe is the current valuation of that building. And for that we employ valuers to come in and provide us with that information, specialists in those specific areas. We also estimate a depreciation, so a kind of wear and tear on those assets over the period. And again, that's in line with a judgment based on the norms for the kind of assets concerned and trends. We estimate things such as bad debt provision, so provision for doubtful debts, not because they are bad and they're uncollectible, but the potential for them to turn bad. So we're looking at methodologies for indicating those that have been, say, outstanding for a significant period of time, dependent on the time that they have been outstanding for. Even though there is recovery action in place, we would build something into the accounts just in case. Other areas, the pension, as Matt referred to earlier, is a significant sum that is in the accounts. As far as the accounts are concerned, what we record during the course of the year are the payments that we make, both the deductions from employee salaries and what the employer contributes during the course of the year to the pension fund to pay for pensions, not only of the current employees, but of employees who have previously worked here in the past. So, but when the accounts are produced, because they are produced on a different basis and they incorporate the assets of the pension fund, be they bonds, stocks, buildings and liabilities, so, you know, future pension costs of anybody who's ever been in the scheme, again, they're estimates, and therefore we rely on the judgment of professionals. The actuaries, Merters are actuaries, and indeed they act for the majority of, well, for all of the districts and unitaries and the county council as well in relation to that. So that's just a flavour for some of the things that we can't tie it down to kind of pound, shilling, pence. There is an element of judgment in there, and we give that information to Grant Thornton to inform their planning. So the report is there kind of for information, and happy to take any questions that you might have on that.
Questions? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Just on Appendix B on page 71, it gives the details of a revised approach to the calculation of the minimum revenue provision. I wonder, I'll take the challenge now. Could you, in plain English, explain what difference that makes, and specifically whether as a consequence the minimum revenue provision is greater or less as a result of the changes?
So as a consequence of the changes were adopted by full council in February. So there is no impact on the 21-22 statutory accounts that will be produced, because the council approved back in February a change to the provision, the policy, and that will be applicable from the 1st of April, so it will be applicable to next year's accounts, not this year's financial accounts.
Yes, but you're not saying, I don't think, that the figures in those accounts would have been the same if the method of calculation had not been changed.
The figures that are included in the accounts for 21-22 are based on the policy that was approved by Council back in February 2021, because that's the policy they approved for the full year, and that's how the figures are. So they are in line with the old policy, if you will, because the new policy doesn't take effect until the new financial year, which began on the 1st of April. The new policy that has been adopted will only be applicable for that date. It's not retrospective, and that has a different approach in terms of the provision that will be made, and the provision will be less in certain sections of the MRP. The MRP is broken down into assets pre-2008, post-2008, different types of assets, and so there's different approaches and methodologies dependent on the type of asset and the year, and that will be applicable for the new set of accounts. So it'll be, yeah.
Yeah, I follow that. I'm just wondering if we know how much less the MRP is as a consequence of having made the changes. In other words, do we know what it would have been and what the difference is?
So as far as 21-22 is concerned.
Councillor Chalmers, can I ask you to press your button when you're not speaking, please? It puts the camera back onto Louise.
Oh, sorry. So 21-22, what was expected under the old policy will be, because we won't adjust those figures whatsoever, because we won't do any retrospective adjustment. So the figure for 21-22 is the figure for 21-22 as approved by the policy in Council in February. Going forward, for the year 22-23, which we'll come to obviously have this discussion this point next year, under the old policy, the charge for 22-23 would have been greater than it will be under the new policy for 22-23 and going forward. With MRP, I haven't got a precise figure to tell you, but all I say is MRP, it's the same amount, the same value that is spread over the life of the asset. So if in the year 22-23, under the old policy, it would have been more than under the new one. When we get to 2033-34, it's very likely that the charge will be more under the new policy than it would have been under the old policy, because it's the same value that's just spread over the life of the asset.
Are you okay with that, Councillor?
I follow that. What I'm trying to work out is how much we push payments to future generations rather than paying them now as a consequence of having made the change. Because it seems from what you're saying that the MRP is now less than it otherwise would have been if we'd stuck with the old method. I have no way of saying which way is right or preferable, but I am measuring it by the consequences. So, but I think you've said that you don't know what the figure is. So.
I don't. The figures are all detailed in the papers that went to Finance Council that were approved then. There is a breakdown of the individual years. I don't have those to hand. My computer's crashed. But the other point I would make is, whilst in finite terms, if you look at the year 22-23, the costs are under the old and the new are different. In terms of pushing the debt, if you want to call it, into future years, the value of a pound now is much the same pound will be worth a lot less in the future than it is now. So again, the debt is pushed further forward, but so is the actual real terms value of that pound because of the impact of inflation on that and the eroding of the value, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Louise. Any further questions? Councillor Collins?
Thank you, Chair. Page 67, I would just like to ask when the land and buildings had an external valuation, when the last had one.
So all of our land and buildings are revalued on a 5-year cyclical programme. So that means every single one of them will have been valued in the last 5 years. But we, instead of doing them all in 1 year and then nothing for 4 years, they are broken down in that way. So it would depend on which particular building that you were looking at to know whether it was done 1 year, 2 year, 3, 4 years ago. But they are all done at least once within every 5 years. Our investment buildings, so particularly the building that we own with Logistics House, that investment buildings are valued every single year.
Thank you. I was thinking mainly Market Walk. When was that last revalued?
So Market Walk again would be an investment property, and that it's classified as an investment property within the accounts, and that will be valued every year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittam.
Thanks, Chair. Page 58, set aside money for future cases of planning appeals. Are these significant over the last year, or is there a trend, or?
Can I defer that one to you, Dave?
I mean, it's difficult to comment on, but I know there were a run of planning appeals in Chorley last year, and it's difficult to predict. I mean, there's always arguments over housing supply and the issue, so you do have to be ready and prepared for it. It's I can't be any more definite than that, but it's not something to take lightly, and there's always a strong chance of developers challenging planning committee decisions.
Second one. On page 64, there's a question there, number 11 at the bottom of the page. On 64, it says, why are management satisfied that their arrangements for the accounting estimates as detailed in Appendix A are reasonable? And the answer was yes.
Yeah, no, sorry.
Is that misworded? Or?
No, and I had that in my notes to make...
Neville, if you could just press your button, thank you.
To make reference to, yes, we had picked that up. It was not a binary yes or no answer. We can see that, but picked up after the accounts had gone on. So no, in response to that question, the response that we provided is that the accounts are prepared in line with the SIPFA Code of Practice. That's, quite, although we do make judgments and we do make estimates, as I've just referred to, it's quite prescriptive in the format and the way that it needs to be, the accounts need to be set out, and the way certain assets and liabilities and income and expenditure need to be treated. We also make sure that we take on board the recommendations from previous audits and that they are acted upon, and again, audit will come and ensure that that is the case. Accounts are reviewed by senior management, and they make comparisons of the estimates that were proposed compared to what the actuals turned out to be, to know how accurate we are at forecasting. And also there's no significant changes planned in the way that the 21-22 accounts are either planned or put together. So on that basis, that's how we satisfy to make sure that the estimates are right. We take on board all of those.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you. And the recommendation is to review and approve the management responses to the auditor's enquiries. And so I shall propose that. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Gordon-France. And if we can go to the vote, please. And again, that's unanimous. Thank you. On to agenda item number 6 is the Charities and Trust Funds 2021-2022, and that is on page 73 to 80 of your reports. And again, it's Louise Mattinson, Director of Finance, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So we brought the accounts for consideration today to Governance Committee. They are the accounts for the 12 months to the 31st of March for the charities and trusts, which the Council is the sole trustee. Since 2015-16, none of the transactions have been included within the overall Council statement of accounts. They are not material, and as you can see from some of the balances, well, pretty much all of the balances are very small, but as we don't include them in the main statement of accounts of the Council, we just present them here for transparency and for information. So there are five different charities or trust accounts which we look after, 4 of which have balances of less than or around the £5,000 mark. No transactions have taken place on any of them during the year, only interest receivable in terms of the cash balances or the returns on the investments, which a couple of them have external investments. And by external investments, it's just that they're not with the normal bank that we use. They are with very specific investment banks. And with the largest one being the proceeds of the sale of the former Free Library, which is different and has 122,000 with investment. So they're just here for information, really. Nothing has happened on those individual accounts over the course of the year.
Yep. Thank you, Louise. Before moving, any questions on those charities? Councillor Margaret France.
Yes, thank you. Louise, I'm fascinated to hear about the 2 charities bequeathed by the Park family, who were great benefactors for Brinscoll and surrounding villages. They're each a very small pot of money in the general scheme of things these days. And I'm making an assumption that the intention was that they were there for the good of the village, because by and large these were mill owners, and a lot of the villagers were workers in the mills, and a sort of part of the charitable work was to improve the general standards of living for the mill workers. I'm just wondering, you know, in the general scheme of things, what the long-term plan is to do with this little pot of money that's sitting there not really doing anything useful. And is there some way that it can be brought into use for the good of the village in some shape or form, whether it's for leisure or the one that's for, you know, obviously the infectious diseases hospital is long since gone, but there might be other medical things that could be done for the good of the village. Just a thought. Thanks.
So they can be dissolved as charities and trusts, and we would just need to process it. We were discussing this the other day about you'd apply to the Charities Commission to get them dissolved in order to then apply the proceeds for the purposes intended or something as near as possible to the purposes intended. So I have come across that before, and that has happened, whether it's been distributed for a specific purpose as determined by the council, or indeed it's been handed over to another charity who deals with something of a very similar nature. So that's something that we could definitely look to do, because it isn't doing anything here at all, and you can see from the value of the balance. So that's definitely something for us to pick up and explore options on that. But it would be with the approval of the Charities Commission.
Yep. Thank you, Louise. Councillor Lemarinel, please.
Hi. Does it have to be in the centre of Charlie specific, or could it be sort of outlying villages and districts?
In relation to which one, sorry?
In relation to the 2 that my Councillor Francis referred to, and in particular the William Cocker one around recreations, recreation grounds. Does it have to be within the centre of Charlie, or can it be sort of for outlying villages?
So in relation to the WB Parks charity and the HT Parks Bath Fund, both of those are were set up, one being for the extension of the infectious diseases hospital in Withnell, and then the other one for the maintenance of Brinscall Baths. So again, we'd have to look at what the purpose of, but it sounds pretty clear that the purpose is for that specific area. The other one, the William Cocker charity, that's for the provision of recreation grounds in Chorley. So there's nothing more specific than that. That would just be something around the recreation grounds. So it's always, I mean, you know, we would have to take advice from the Charity Commission to see what we could do, what was eligible, but it's to try and ensure that for the purposes it was intended, we carry out those wishes really and apply it accordingly. So I think for the first two, it would appear it's a Brinscall Withnell thing. The one that you referred to, William Cock, I would say that's surely nothing more specific than that.
No. Thank you. Any more? No. And the recommendation for this is that the accounts presented in Appendix A to E to be approved. I will basically propose that we do that, but do we have a seconder? I will take Councillor Whittam for a change. Thank you, Gordon. And if I could ask you to vote on your screens, please. Thank you, and again that is unanimous. On to the next item. Item 7 is the Internal Audit Annual Report and Opinion 2021 to 2022, which you'll find on pages 81 to 98 of your reports. And if I can ask Dawn Highton, which is the Service Lead for Audit and Risk, to present this report, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the report before you today is, as I said, it's our annual report, which also contains the Head of Audit opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control. So the actual report itself is attached to Appendix A, and I won't go through it in detail, but if I can just highlight some key areas. Firstly, I think what's important to note is the role of internal audit and management, in that internal audit is an independent assurance function, and that's set out in the graphic at the top of page 85, in that the Council's adopted the 3 lines of defence model, in that management are responsible for the first line, and then other inspection agencies and assurance functions are the second line, with internal audit being the 3rd line of defence. So work that we take into account to form the opinion includes all the work that we've carried out over the course of the year from the internal audit plan, any advice or consultancy work, any project teams that we've sat on, the implementation of agreed management actions, which is included later on in the report, the quality and performance of our own service, and again that's discussed both in this report and as a separate item on the agenda. Other sources of assurance where we can place reliance on those, and again the service assurance statements that's used to inform the annual governance statement. So when we're forming the opinion, it's important that the opinion has contained sufficient coverage. So the work that we rely on is sufficient to cover the whole authority. And again, the pie chart on page 86 shows the coverage of the whole authority, and that we're not placing reliance on specific sectors. We've got a good range of coverage. The actual opinion is contained at paragraph 13, and for 21-22 we're actually saying that the adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's governance, risk management and control processes are adequate. And that is down to the fact that over the past 12 to 18 months, there's been a significant amount of change in terms of processes and controls with the introduction of the strengthening and expansion of shared services. And the council now have to ensure that those processes, new processes or revised processes, are fully embedded across the whole authority, and it becomes business as usual. Again, on the following page, on page 87, within each report or review that we carry out, we can base the assurance on those 4 assurance ratings. And I've given details of the number and types of review that we've carried out that have received those assurance ratings. And the Appendix B, the summary of work that we've completed over the course of the year, that contains full details of the work that we've done and the reason for the assurance rating. There is other work that we carry out, like I say, that doesn't necessarily result in an assurance opinion, and that's detailed at paragraph 16. And again, like as I mentioned earlier, we also can place reliance on the implementation of management actions. Now, over the past 12 months, there's been a significant amount of work undertaken to ensure management actions are implemented. So when we finalise a review and we issue the report, if there are areas which need strengthening or controls which need improving, we agree a management action plan. And this is what this relates to. So we agree a target implementation date and an action owner. And we have a dedicated system now. We use the risk management system in which we record all the agreed actions. And these are reported, the status of each action is reported to the director on a monthly basis. Now, over the course of the year, we have an implementation target rate of 90%. And that was actually achieved for shared services, but Chorley is actually slightly lower at 70%. Now, what we need to bear in mind with that is that for the previous 2 years up to last year, we didn't have a system. We didn't have a robust system of monitoring management actions. So when we started again last year, we were actually starting from a standing still start. So I think to get to 70%, although it's not where we need to be, it's not a horrific picture. We have actually looked at what's still outstanding and the reasons why they're still outstanding, and that's explained in paragraph 20. But what we are expecting is as IT develops and staffing settles across the authority, then we are hoping that that implementation rate will increase over the next 6 to 8 months. Again, I've put a bit of some commentary on our risk management arrangements to give you assurance about that. But again, that is highlighted in the annual governance statement, which is also on the agenda. And the section about our conformance with the public sector internal audit standards, which again is the next item on the agenda. In terms of our own performance, there are just 2 indicators which are slightly below target. So we have, for our planned time used, we have a 90% target rate. We actually achieved 84. So that's about how much time we're actually inputting into the audit plan. However, what I would say is, despite the fact that we didn't reach that target of 90%, we still managed to achieve the target for the plan completed. We had significant resourcing issues over the past 12 months. We tried to recruit on 2 occasions, and although we were successful, to be honest, they didn't last very long because they were poached. So we had significant issues in terms of the staffing, and the plan was based on the fact that we would be able to recruit successfully. So we had to adapt the way that we worked. So that's why the planned time use is slightly below. But because we adapted, we were still able to achieve the plan. So they're the key areas I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dawn. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a great fan of British understatement, and in that context, I just wanted to be absolutely clear about what the words in the report mean, because in page 87, you've helpfully listed what happens when you audit individual services or projects or whatever, and you've got a number of grades: full, substantial, adequate, and limited. And adequate is is there quite far down. I'm wondering if you're using a different system when you give the opinion on page 86, which is about things more generally, if you will, in terms of the council's governance, risk management and control processes. Because when you've described it as adequate there, I'm guessing, is adequate as good as it could get, or could it be better?
In terms of the overall opinion, could it be better? I would say yes, it could be better. I wouldn't say adequate is necessarily bad. And like you say, I think it's the terminology that's used. It's partial reliance, but again, that sounds quite negative. I think you have to understand as well that auditors don't particularly like to say things are well unless they have lots and lots of evidence to support that. And from the evidence we've gathered over the course of this year, that's where our opinion lies. It can always be better. We could hopefully get to a point in time where we'll be able to give full assurance. If you take back to what I said about the significant changes, they need to embed within the organisation. Now, I've got no reason to believe that they won't embed over the course of the next 12 months. There's lots of things going on. There's lots of training going on. There's lots of governance processes that are monitoring this now. So I would expect, all things being considered, that hopefully next year we'll be here with a substantial rating.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I do have one specific question, if I could, as well. Just trying to find which page it's on. It's about Primrose Gardens. It's page 92. So there it says that issues were identified that have the potential to expose the council to financial and reputational damage with regard to basically what would have happened if there had been an emergency incident and a lack of a plan. Now, there are some reassuring noises later on about management actions and so on. I wanted to know if specifically the planning had now been done and that issue had been resolved.
Yes, because of the criticality of some of the actions that we identified, we put very short timescale on those actions for implementation, and yes, they've been implemented now.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret France.
Can I ask whether the staffing issues have been resolved? Because they obviously contribute highly to some of the kind of negative results. I'd just like to know what the vacancy rate is within the department and what you're doing to recruit. Thanks.
Yeah, but what at the start of last year, it was recognised that because of the impact on COVID and the impact it had on the internal audit service over the previous year, in that basically they were redeployed for a large proportion of that year, we had a backlog of work. So it was agreed that we could recruit an additional auditor and again a temporary one for a period of time, which we did, but as I said, you know, that didn't work out as we anticipated. We're now going to change tack because there is a shortage everywhere of internal auditors, and any local authority that you go to is struggling. So we're going to change tack and we are going to recruit a trainee auditor. Now, we're expecting that process to start over the summer for them to be in post by September. And then we're going to have a full training package for that particular person so that they can become as qualified as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Dawn. Any further questions? No. The recommendation is to note the report for the year ended 31st of March 2022. So happy to note that. Moving on, agenda item 8 is the review of the effectiveness of internal audit 2022, and you'll find that on pages 99 to 150 of your report. And if I can ask Dawn Heighton again to please present this report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report, really, it's a bit back to front because maybe it would have been better if we'd done this one first, in that this gives you the assurance that the opinion I've just given is based on the public sector internal audit standards. So as a service, we have to comply with the standards, and they're very rigid and they're very detailed. and that there's attribute standards and behaviour standards that we have to conform with. And again, what I've done is I've attached the actual checklist, which is the local government application note, which is derived from the standards. And I've explained for each particular point how we conform with those standards. So out of the 134 different aspects of the standards, we fully conform with 128. There are 5 which are not applicable, and we have 1 which is a partial conformance, and that relates to fraud, which is also included in the annual governance statement, which is coming later in the agenda. The other thing I've attached is our quality assurance and improvement programme. So not only do we have to set out, this is part of the standards, we have to set out what our assurance and improvement programme is. And this contains the review process that we have to go through, both from internally, so from how we ensure that the opinion we give for each individual review and the assurance rating, how that is done in such a way that another auditor could come in and reach the same conclusion. So it's about the evidence we have to hold, the process we have to go through. So it's very rigorous and robust, like I said. In addition to this, we have to do the self-assessment annually and present it to yourselves for approval. But we also, once in every 5 years, we have to be externally verified. Our last verification was done in 2018, and our next one is due in January 23. So hopefully this time next year, I'll be able to bring back the report from the external verification team that confirms that we conform to the standards as well. But thank you again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dawn. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. On page 117, the first item on there, it's on my copy at least, only partial is crossed out. It leaves it hanging between conforming and not conforming. I'm guessing from what you've said, you mean conforming, but I know we're all on tenterhooks, and you've added a bit of drama there, and I'm hoping that you can resolve that matter.
Yes, I can. That non-conforming should be crossed out as well. I'll fix that for next time.
Any further questions? Councillor Whittam.
Thanks, Chair. Page 132, the partial for potential fraud, are the council experiencing any fraud, or is it something that's just being picked up in a 9001 audit for not being an area covered?
No, the reason for that is within each individual we do audit review that we do, as it says there, we consider the risk of fraud and make sure that the controls are robust. What we can do is what we've done is there is specific guidance from CITFA about the fighting fraud and corruption locally, and that contains a further checklist which we've completed and contains compared the council's arrangements to it, and that there are areas in general in which we can improve our fraud arrangements. So that's something that's featuring in the annual governance statements, and something we're looking at doing over the course of the next 6 to 8 months.
Thank you. If that's no more questions there. And the recommendation is that the committee notes the results of the self-assessment recently undertaken as part of the Governance Committee's consideration of the system of internal control. So if we're happy to note that. Right. And we'll move on to item agenda 9, which is the draft annual governance statement, pages 151 to 162 in your reports. And if I could ask Dave Whelan, the service lead for legal, to present this report, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The recommendation of this report is that the annual governance statement should be approved as a correct statement of the Council's governance environment and be recommended to the leader and Chief Executive for signature. Members will be aware that we are legally required to produce such a document each year. The annual governance statement is prepared in accordance with all relevant guidance and is drawn from evidence from various sources. In particular, it draws on the work from internal audit and from senior management. The Council is under a general duty to ensure that it has in place a sound system of governance, that it regularly reviews the effectiveness of that system, and that it continually seeks to achieve best value in service delivery. As part of that general process, we must produce an annual governance statement. This goes hand in hand with the statement of accounts. This council has an up-to-date code of governance in place, and we review our existing governance framework against the principles in that code. You'll see that the annual governance statement has 5 sections: an introduction, a section dealing with the council's responsibility in producing an annual governance statement and the purpose it fulfills. I mean, fundamentally, its principal purpose is to provide reassurance to councillors and to the public that we have sound governance arrangements in place, and to external people as well, of course. Thirdly, third section relates to the governance framework and how the council complies with its own local code. Fourthly, how the council reviews the effectiveness of the governance framework. And then finally, the final section deals with the steps that have been taken to test and enhance the council's governance framework and the actions that need to be taken in the coming period. I would suggest that this final section is probably the most important part of the document. You'll see in the document in Table A the following, the previous themes and actions are set out there. In Table A, you will see that there were 8 actions listed. 4 of those actions have been completed in full. 1 is substantially complete. 1 is ongoing, and 2 others are carried forward. Table B will include all the key themes and actions moving forward for the next 12 months. You'll see it's divided into 3 sections: 1, process systems; 2, staff development; and 3, corporate. Key issues identified include dealing with fraud, which has already been referred to, something about risk management, which has already been referred to, issues such as GDPR, where there's an obvious continuous need to train and improve, constitution, where again there's always a continuous need to improve and develop. So there are 12 actions in total moving forward. That is a summary of the report, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 small points. I'll do them in reverse order. First of all, right at the end of the report, how many Section 151 officers do we have? Because I thought there was only 1.
Yes, sorry.
It's just that Gary's put down there as that, and I can see on Louise's thing that it says that she occupies that role.
Yeah, apologies for that. There is only just the 1 Section 151 officer, who is, of course, Louise.
The other 2 points are on the first page. On the first sentence of on point 2, I can't quite get it to work. I think there may well be a word missing. It says the governance framework comprises the systems and processes and cultures and values by which control and direct the council. I don't know, is the word members missing or something like that?
Sorry, which are we in the actual annual governance statement?
Yes, page 155, point 2.
So the governance framework comprises the systems and processes and culture and values by which control. Yes, sorry, I should put the microphone on, it would help. Yes, I agree that sentence doesn't quite read perfectly. Just to try and summarise it, the governance framework consists of the systems and procedures and culture and values which control and direct the council. I think, does that make more sense?
And sorry, my final point is 1 down in in number 3 on the governance framework. It mentions how we do things at South Ribble Borough Council, which I suspect is an incorrect reference.
Yeah, yes, apologies. That should, of course, be Chorley Borough Council. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Any further questions? Nope. Right. The recommendation then is that the annual governance statement be approved as a correct statement of the council's governance environment and be recommended to the leader and chief executive for signature, obviously with those bits that were just pointed out by Councillor Chapman. I'd like to propose that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Lemarinel. And if I could ask you to vote on your screen, please. And that's unanimous again. Thank you. On to agenda item number 10. It's the RIPA application update. And if I could ask the Deputy Monitoring Officer will present a verbal update.
Yes, Chair, just to say there have been no further RIPA operations within the last period of time. Just to give members a little bit of background to this, RIPA stands for the Regulation of Investigation. Sorry, I forgot the full acronym now. It's the legislation that governs the carrying out of surveillance activities, and the covert surveillance activities in particular. 12 years ago or so, the legislation was changed, was toughened up, so that it was harder for councils to obtain authorisation to carry out such activities. Chorley Borough Council, along with a number of other councils, have carried out very few, if any, RIPA operations within the last 10 to 12 years. So there've been none in the last period of months. And just to be clear, it stands for the Regulation of Investigation and Proceedings Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So I shall move on to item 11, which is the work programme, pages 163, 164 of your report. And I'll just ask Dawn to come in on this, please. Sorry, not Dawn, Louise.
I'm looking shocked there. No, so the work programme has been updated and will be ready to go to the next meeting, because if you look at the current report that's sat in there, the 3rd of August has no work in it at all, and I can assure you that work is taking place. So there's updates to go in from both myself as Section 151 and also Chris Moister as the monitoring officer as well to include on there. But it's just to assure you that there is work taking place that will be presented to the next meeting.
Yep. Thank you, Louise. Item 12 is any urgent business previously agreed with the chair, and there are none. So I would like to thank everybody's attendance at this meeting and those who have attended virtually as well. Thank you for the varied questions. It's always good to see lots of questions at this committee.